Of hiding places for the koi.
But this is Gaillardia that I love.
Almost every part of the garden has some interesting things happening, and there's some pretty wonderful sweeps of color. There you can see in front of the waterfall there's an iris. That's a Siberian iris.
All of the things that we are growing with just the support of the health of the earth and good horticulture, good care. So we're lucky to be here, fairly close to the foothills with this beautiful landscape. You can see the flatirons are there.
As you can see, the rock garden has come into its glory. This is the time of year when you don't really have to talk much about it. It talks for itself, and it talks in a lot of colors, and it's really fun. This is the cliff rose, which is a native of the Colorado Plateau, all the canyon country in Utah and western Colorado, and in Arizona you'll find this, and it blooms, as you can see, in the early summer. Edward Abbey in Desert Solitaire dedicated an entire chapter to this. You know, it is such an inspiring plant when you see it in nature, because it makes these incredibly gnarly sort of bonsai shapes on the cliffs. And then it blooms pretty much all summer. It blooms on and off all summer, but it has a big flush right now. And you can see it's loaded with even more buds. And what's amazing is that it has a very sweet fragrance. It's in the rose family. You can see it's kind of like a rose, but it's totally not spiny. And the other thing that's so wonderful about this is that the leaves are incredibly aromatic. This is just a fantastic plant, and it's so sad. In Denver, I've only seen this in 2 or 3 gardens, and yet it's one of our most beautiful native plants. And it's the sort of thing that ought to be used in median strips and all sorts of places, because it needs no water. It comes from almost a desert environment. But what a beautiful flower that is. And so sweetly fragrant. Just love it. I scattered seed, and it's starting to come up. This is our native blue flax, and it makes a wonderful combination with the poppies. Really, late May and June are when rock gardens are at their peak. If you remember all the purple daphnes, that was just a mound of purple a month ago when you were here last. And but now the white daphnes, this is one from Greece and Turkey again. I've seen that on Mount Olympus in both Turkey and Mount Olympus in Greece. And it's on almost every mountain in Greece. It's Daphne oleoides. Of course, some of my greatest little treasures are tucked away on the backside here, where a lot of people never come. There's a dianthus that's blooming for the very first time. Probably one of the most unusual plants in the garden is tucked in that rock there. That's believe it or not, that's a little petunia relative. It's called Petunia patagonica, and we have beautiful specimens of the Botanic Gardens growing in full sun on top of in the step garden on these beds. So I think it really would like more sun, but it seems to do fine in that little crevice, and it's bloomed for me several years now. I have planted some more in sunnier spots, hoping I can get some of these big cushions like they have at the gardens. You'll see that tucked around here I have lots of different ferns. This is a fern called a Chilanthes. At least that's what the name has always traditionally been. I think they're trying to change it, but they grow in very dry areas in the southwest. You'll even see them growing with saguaros, various kinds of Chilanthes and Pelleas and things in that group. This is one that's pretty much restricted to Colorado. It grows in a few neighboring states, but it's most abundant here. And you'll find it in the foothills around Denver, and it can cover a whole hillside. They grow rather slowly, but they're pretty choice, and you can see I have quite a bit of it here. I'm very fond of these dryland ferns, and I have a nice collection of them. This is one of my favorite vignettes right now. It's kind of patriotic with red, white, and blue, but it also kind of symbolizes what I'm up to. This is the Colorado columbine. We had the Colorado Native Plant Society touring yesterday, and of course our state flower was de rigueur, but it's our local native. And then here we have two natives of Southern Europe and Asia. The bright red peony is Paeonia peregrina, which grows in the Balkans, and it also grows in Greece, of course, which is where my family comes from. And but the red flower is from Turkey, so that you can see the Greeks and the Turks get along quite well here in the garden. And it's actually was discovered a little more than 100 years ago by Sprenger. It's Tulipa sprengeri, and it has since never been found again in the wild, so they think it's extinct, but it loves gardens. So this is one of my little vignettes. This time of year we have quite a few of those. Certain areas, you know, for example, a perennial border, I may try and get certain color combinations, but when it comes to woodland gardens or rock gardens, most of the plants really look good together because in the wild, you know, they appeal to a variety of pollinators. A lot of them tend to be in the blue and yellow range, and then you get some nice pinks that offer a big change. And so I usually, when I plant a plant, I don't think about the color combination so much because they usually work out. I think about where will that plant really grow well. In a rock garden especially, as you go around a rock, the variation in microclimate is dramatic. So if you put a plant on one spot, thinking that it will combine beautifully as a color, it may die. But if you put it a few inches away, it may live. And so I'm more interested in getting it to survive. And occasionally you get some funny color combinations and you have to maybe do something about it. But most of the time, as you can see, it has that look of a wild hillside. So you can see there's lots and lots of color from the trees, from shrubs. And then of course the perennials are going crazy. This is they call them blue stars, and they're pretty much restricted to America, although there is one that grows in Asia. The Amsonias are found pretty much from coast to coast, but we have one in Colorado that's quite dwarf and is finished blooming. This is one from Missouri that's quite rare, and it's pretty local in the Midwest. But it sure loves my garden. It's been self-sowing and producing some little babies here and there, but it loves that icy blue color. is really gorgeous, and it blooms for a very long time. And fortunately, some of the poppies decided to grow near it. That's the horn poppy, which is one of my sort of signature weeds. And the combination, I think, has been delightful. And then, of course, the pink gas plant behind. Gas plants are one of my really favorite groups of plants. And you'll see them in almost every bed because they kind of plant themselves around. They're in the citrus family. You can see all the tulips. They're not quite open in here where it's a little darker. They've self-sown all through this bed. They seem to like to grow with other plants, and all the gas plants. And then in front of a plant which almost everybody who sees it gets enchanted is clematis. It's a shrubby clematis. It's actually herbaceous. It dies down to the ground, but it has kind of a beautiful sort of purple-pink flower. Those are tall-bearded iris back there, and this is a really nice specimen here. And they're the largest of the bearded iris are these tall hybrids. And what happened is that the chromosomes doubled on the old wild types of irises, and the doubled chromosomes produce much bigger flowers. And when that happened with a few plants, they were selected, they found some of these that happened, they began crossing those, and from those crosses, they've developed a phenomenal variety of flowers, and they have these huge flowers. As you can see, they call them the poor man's orchid. Although if you want to buy some of the new hybrids, you better not be a poor man because they're not that cheap. But at any rate, they're pretty glorious plants. That's not a tall-bearded iris. That's one of the old diploid irises that are closely related, but they have half the number of chromosomes. They have extreme vigor, though. The old varieties are closer to nature, so to speak. And as they've hybridized these old tall-bearded irises into these new forms, they've lost a little bit of that vigor, so you have to kind of baby them more. So here's a good example of the old Germanica type, the old old-fashioned bearded irises that and these have been sort of become unfashionable with the iris, some of the iris growers. And of course, there are people who specialize in growing these. And down at Chatfield, we actually have a collection of about 500 species and old-fashioned selections. It's probably one of the best collections in any public garden. And I'm really proud of how they maintain that. The staff down there have done a fantastic job. This is another one of these old-fashioned irises. This is iris, a form of iris variegata, and you can see it has the kind of variegated falls. It was a hybrid that was produced from variegata probably 100 years ago or so, and you can find this in old houses around Denver. And I think that having a beautiful setting for your life will really help people bring light to the darkness in our human civilization.
Well, what I'm all about right now is try to grow a plant that's suited to where you live. So like if you live in Colorado, grow some Colorado native plants, because you won't have to spend hours changing the soil and babying it. It's used to living here, and so it's going to do well. Also, plant in big swaths of things, and that's better for the bees, and it's easier for you, and the plants are happier because they naturally grow in big colonies like that. So I garden for the ecosystem and for intense life in my garden. We brought in all these boulders and love it when we happen to get a little special plant. So we've planted a lot of things like this Rosa woodsii that's a native plant. We tried to plant a lot of native plants down here, but also a lot of step garden plants. And I've been on the board of the Denver Botanic Gardens for years and really influenced by their step garden, and was on their Gardens and Conservation Committee when they designed that. And this is our buffalo grass lawn, and I can't bear to mow out some of these wildflowers that come into it. These little erigerons have blown in. They open up later in the day, and I can't bear to cut down these beautiful blue flax. So this is sort of a meadow, even though it's really the lawn area. But these are the step rocks that I was talking about that are just exactly copying the Denver Botanic Gardens. So it's great to have a place that can inspire gardens of our own. So this little anemone is sweet, blooming now. I like this one, and these little penstemon are cute. This garden is ever changing and all crowded and munched by the deer, but keeps coming back. This is a heath aster that when I bought it, I said I wanted something that's going to be low and hugging the ground, and it ended up being really tall. But there it is, and I just have to leave it because I love it. And I garden a lot for the ecosystem and biodiversity in my yard, and so I let the clover go because it's great bee food. I have a lot of native plants that are great for all the native butterfly larvae and all that. And so, yeah, I don't cut things back in the winter. I let everything go. I let things go to seed. They pop up here and there, so I'm always surprised in the garden. And I have a garden, and it's just basically me and my husband taking care of it. And I have a few people that come to help with the lawn and such, but it's way too much for me to be a pristine gardener. So I go for the meadow look, which is what we see over here. Oh, and come and see these. This is a sort of a new garden that I had to put in because I got overrun with mint that came down in the flood. So I'm putting in some natives like this Penstemon strictus. It's the first year, and look at all these little native bees that are coming out to visit it. I spend a lot of time in the garden just looking at there's a little osmia, there's a sweat bee, a bright green sweat bee, other little sweat bees on here. I see all kinds of big bumblebees. So when I started putting a lot of natives, and when I started leaving the leaves over the winter, like piles of leaves, I suddenly have so many more creatures, and I walk down and it's full of sounds and buzzing and butterflies, and it's really been really fun. This is a native plant, sneezeweed. We spend a lot of time hiking up in the mountains, and this is one of my favorite ones. It usually has tons of bumblebees on it up in the mountains, and so I planted some of that last year, so that's been fun. And here's my clover garden, which is always full of life. lots of bees and things. And underneath it I have purple prairie clover about to come up, and the gaillardia over there. And it's foxtail lily time of year. So it's middle of June, and over here you can get a sort of a long view of the foxtail lilies, which is another thing they have a lot of at the Denver Botanic Gardens, people might recognize. But this is gaillardia that I love. A couple different varieties in here. This one is the true native. It has the daddy long legs on it. It's Gaillardia aristata. But these are just coming into their glory, the foxtail lilies. They start blooming from the bottom and they bloom, 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 bloom up towards the top. And they have a really nice long bloom time, which I like. If you don't give them too much water and too much love, they do better. Well, that orangish one is called Cleopatra. That's probably my favorite color. And there's different kinds. I have this pink one, or yeah, this is a different kind. I'm not sure the name of that one. That's sort of a very, very light shell pink. And then the big white ones over here are Robustus. And we can maybe get a close look at the pollen on these. The pollen is incredible. But these are really, really tall. And these are not as far along just because they're in the shadier part. And but look at the long, long pollen on those. Big bumblebees love these, and little tiny bees love them. And this is a stream, a recirculating stream that we put in. It's the second iteration of it because the first one started leaking after about 10 years. And so we renovated this and put a lot more native plants around the stream as well. But I'm not strictly natives. I think adding natives wherever you can is great, but I just incorporate them into my regular garden wherever it's appropriate. We could walk up these steps. This is where we put a lot of woodland plants, and there's some natives like that 9-bark, and then there's this, I love this Japanese Hackleocloa, I think it's called, the lime grass, so pretty, and of course the little campanulas. This just finished. I've been trying so hard to get this Dodecathenon to bloom. And I think I planted two, one year and it didn't come back, so I planted another one. And then they both bloomed this year, and one is white and one is pink. So I think it's actually two plants, not one. And the iris, again, these are different. These are not natives, but they have their about 1 week of splendor.
Okay, we can move over this way. So this is the part of the garden that we really enjoy the most. Out here we can feed the koi. And over here, to cross this stream, I wanted to make it very natural looking, kind of like if you're out in the mountains and got to get across a stream. Well, you'll find some rock in the stream that you can step on partway across and then finally get across to the other side. Welcome everybody here to our garden. Okay, here's some more of this Himalayan maidenhair fern. I have this many different places in the garden. I like it very much. Just a very nice, delicate leaf structure associated with it. There's some other plants here. Here's a dwarf rhododendron that's just beginning to bloom. You'll see over there kind of an orangish red color. That's been quite reliable, except for 2 or 3 years where we had some really strange weather that caused it not to bloom. Quite a few years ago, we had a case where our first frost of the season, like in November or so, it hadn't even got down to freezing before that, but the first one that we got down to -20, and a lot of the plants did not like that. That one, it took a couple years before it really sort of come back again and start blooming. Another plant that had some damage to it, it's a Comiciferous obtusa, a dwarf form of that. Anyway, it had some dieback. It's starting to finally come back. That particular plant is probably about 30 years old. Over here is a Japanese maple that has a nice red color in the spring and in the fall. In the summer, it's more of a maroon color. It gets a little bit darker in the summer. This one big rock, the 7-ton rock, if I had it just there by itself, it might look a little bit artificial. So I have some of these other smaller rocks around it and providing planting places for various rock garden alpine plants. Originally my wife said when we had the pond and we didn't have fish in it, she said, well, why don't we get some koi? And at first I was a little bit reluctant, thinking, well, with fish in the pond, it's going to be hard to keep it clean. But actually it turns out it's just the opposite. The fish keep it very clean. In addition to eating the fish food, as long as we don't feed them too much, they'll eat their vegetables, which is the algae that might grow on the rocks. A cyclamen purpurescens, that's an evergreen. It's the one cyclamen that stays evergreen throughout the year. A lot of people ask me whether I had a landscape architect help design it and help build it and so on. No, it's something I did myself, and starting from about the early 1980s, wanting to have a general area here with some water features. I knew right where I'm standing now it would be a patio, just to be able to come out here and have dinner outside or breakfast or lunch or whatever, and wanting to have the main pond kind of close to that patio area. So that was the first part of the vision. And then the vision of somewhere higher up having a kind of an alpine pond, and then some waterfalls and streams coming down from there. All the plants on this rock right here, except for this, it's a ponderosa pine that came with the rock, but because the roots are in the crack of the rock, it grows extremely slowly. All the other plants, all these ferns that you'll see here, and some of the dwarf spruce, have come up from seed, from ferns, or from the spore, from ferns that I have other places in the garden. This rock, since it sits in the water, and it's all the rock are sandstone, there's layers, and the water will tend to seep up through those layers and provide a perfect environment for fern spores once they light on in that kind of a moist area to finally turn into the ferns. Here we have a dwarf rhododendron called Mount Seven Star. I have several of the rhododendrons that are part of the North Tisbury rhododendrons from Massachusetts. Polly Hill was the one there that brought in some rhododendrons from China. Actually, I think maybe from Taiwan, and propagated a lot of them. And I think it's rhododendron Nakahara, various hybrids of that that are extremely reliable here in our Colorado garden. This one is relatively new. This is maybe only about 4 or 5 years old. It's doing well. But one I pointed out earlier has been around for 25 or 30 years or so and blooms about every year. Pretty much all of these dwarf rhododendrons usually are in bloom on July 4th. Another one in bloom over there, rhododendron Rukizan, a dwarf rhododendron that's been there for 4 or 5 years. Okay, so you'll see another waterfall here, and the water going underneath a bridge. I found this nice rock that would form a very nice natural looking bridge across the stream. I was interested in creating what seemed like a canyon or a valley, and that's what these two rocks are here. And then so we have a intermediate pond in between these two rocks. These two rocks are the first ones that I bought for the garden. One here and one there. That's about 4 tons, and this is about 3 tons.
My name is Michael Bronner. I'm the founder of Harlequin's Gardens Plant Nursery, which is here, and we developed these gardens actually before the nursery started. When we first got here, this ground had not a tree on it, no shrubs, no perennials, just bare ground. And the water supply here is extremely limited. Even the nursery, even with the nursery, we're operating the whole thing out of 3 cisterns, 2 on this side and 1 on the wholesale side. So everything that's growing here was started off by being watered by hand. All of these gardens have been time tested and drought tested. All of the trees, the shrubs, the roses, this garden here, everything that's growing has been managed with very little water and just with a little soil prep. This garden itself, you might say, it's a garden of a very busy old person after the spring bloom. So it's not a garden that you might see on the cover of Fine Gardening magazine, but I'm very proud of this garden. And what I'm really proud of is the fact that the garden, that nature is able to produce this much beauty and resilience without a lot of my care. I used to spend a lot more time here, but I don't have the time for it anymore. And still, even though there's a lot of weeds in here, it still looks nice. One of the things I'm proud about here is that the garden has been watered between 4 and 7 times a year for the last 30 years. Another thing that I'm proud of with this garden is that we've never used any pesticides or herbicides or fungicides on the garden ever. And that in terms of care, we do give it some compost sometimes. We give it some minerals sometimes, and once in a while a little fertilizer. But largely, these plants have naturalized. I still add things once in a while, but I don't have a lot of time for that anymore. And so these plants have naturalized, and the tough have survived, and it's really basically at this point nature taking care of itself. And that's what's so wonderful, is that even with a little care, once you have the reasonable soil preparation and some good bones, some good shrubs and whatnot, nature is really powerful. And this garden will look not very different from this, even if we should have serious climate change problems. It's already been drought tested. They shut off the water to a lot of people. This garden will still continue because it's used to drought. We grow a lot of natives here. The natives obviously have also stood the test of time, and so they belong here. And so a lot of them are perfectly adapted to here and have done very well. This tree, which is usually talked about as a shrub, is curl leaf mountain mahogany. And it's about in time for a prune here, take a little bit off the top, but it's been here for 35 years. It's one of the oldest plants in my garden. And it is a broad-leafed evergreen, which is very unusual that a broad-leafed evergreen can stand in full sun in Colorado winter sun. But the only thing it can't handle is shade. So right across from us is a non-native, and this is a European elderberry, very important berries for our immune system, very good pollinator plant. A lot of bees appreciate these kind of clusters of flowers. Right behind it is an Arizona cypress. They're generally not thought of as hardy in our area, but Alan Taylor from the University of Colorado found this growing on a high mountain in Arizona and has brought it here, and look how successful it is. So other natives, this garden over here is almost exclusively natives. In the background, there is a hackberry tree, Celtis occidentalis, that is one of the most drought-tolerant big shade trees for our area. This is three-leaf sumac, which is a native of our foothills here, and it stands a considerable amount of drought. In fact, I should begin by saying this entire garden is never watered. It was watered a couple times when it was first planted. It was watered once in the drought of 2002. After that, it has not been watered. So, you know, we have these interesting choyas. This is the sort of yellow-green choya. This is the pink one. The red one, the red-purple one is just starting to bloom over there. Behind this, there's a gamble oak, and this is Apache plume. And behind that is a very unusual tree called Telea, P-T-E-L-E-A. And if I don't know, you can see there's a swallowtail butterfly right now fluttering around the blossoms of the Telea. And that is not thought of as a very drought-tolerant tree, but it's been there for many, many years. It doesn't get much bigger than 12, 15 feet, but it does get these yellow, very pale yellow blossoms in the spring, and after that it gets these fairly large disc-shaped seeds. In front of this is Chelopsis linearis. It's called desert willow, even though it's not a willow, and it will be blooming fairly soon with these orchid-like flowers. And really quite a remarkable plant that is related to a catalpa. But it also, in spite of the fact that it looks like an orchid, is never watered. This is the cholla. And you can see the purple blooms are just now starting to come out on that. Behind that, there is a lead plant. It's a little hard to see right now. It's sort of gray-blue foliage. The flowers will be coming out soon. And back behind that, we're not totally purists around here. That's not a native. Back there, that's a Russian hawthorn and perfectly adapted to Colorado. It stands a lot of the same conditions that our natives do. Plus it has flowers for the bees and fruit for the birds. So in the middle of the garden is a golden rain tree. And golden rain tree is not a native, but it's totally drought tolerant. And it's a little weedy in that it makes a lot of seeds that you sometimes have to dig out. But it's a beautiful tree. It blooms with flowers in July when nothing else seems to be blooming. This is a selection of our golden currant, Ribes aureum, called Gwen's Buffalo, and it's selected for fruit. And even though this has really only been watered, I think 2 or 3 times this year, you can see it still has fruit on it. It would have more if we watered it more, but it's doing quite well and blooms and fruits every year. And then as we're coming down here, there's this is a selection of our native common mountain mahogany. It's going to get much bigger. And then next to that is a one of our native sages, sand sage, Artemisia filifolia. And then next to that is a southwestern native grass called Wright's Sacaton, Sporobolus wrightii, and that will get probably 5 feet with the grass and 7 feet with the plumes. And next to that is a rather unusual specimen of Forestiera New Mexicana, the New Mexican privet, which is not a privet at all, but a rather drought-tolerant native shrub from the southwest. Let's enter the garden here. This is a boxwood that I have bonsaied in a pot here with a Turkish veronica crawling over the sides. This is our native juniper, Juniperus scopulorum, the Rocky Mountain juniper. This is a rather old specimen of a boxwood. People think, oh, you can't grow a boxwood in a xeriscape garden, but of course we do. And here it is, looking really quite splendid. And it's a Mediterranean plant, so it really isn't, even though it's probably popularized as an English plant, it really is a Mediterranean plant, so it is adapted to drier conditions. And this is an Asian euonymus that makes a nice little tree. And this is a viburnum. It's a special cross of a viburnum. It has beautiful fall color and flowers and fruits. It's not getting as much water as it would like, but it's doing fine. This is our native cliff rose. It's getting a little more shade than it would like. It's leaning out this way, but it has beautiful flowers that support the pollinators, and right next to that is a very unusual specimen for our garden. It's a lily. It's a martagon lily that I never expected to survive here, but my wife convinced me to plant it as a bulb, and there it is. And then right at the base of that is an evergreen shrub called dwarf mountain lover, which was a plant select plant. And amazingly tough and resilient. And then this is a maple, which is related to Norway maple, but it is Acer truncatum, and I'm keeping it as a relatively small tree, but it is more drought tolerant than Norway maple, and is fitting in quite well here. And then kind of in this area, this is the east side of the house. And so being the east side of the house, it doesn't get the late afternoon sun and it doesn't get the west wind. So here is where I put some roses and other things that wouldn't survive out in the blast of our area. We have a lot of sun out here and the west wind is quite fierce. So here on the east side of the house we can have roses, and also I have some of my bonsai collections here, and this is a vine called porcelain vine, which will have porcelain blue berries later in the season. This is an evergreen oak, Quercus turbinella, is sort of just getting started. It's probably 3 years old in my very dry garden, but it will eventually get probably 4, 5, 6 feet high. Another boxwood, and another boxwood back there. And so these are very drought tolerant salvias. It's clary sage, and it, as you may see, it has sowed itself around quite a bit. But for me, it's not a pest. I like it, and it's good for the bees, and so I let it move around. So this obviously is an aspen tree, and in spite of the fact that there's talk that aspens don't belong at this elevation, I've had aspens in my xeriscape garden for 35 years, and they seem to do quite nicely. My experience as an arborist is that aspens need good drainage. They don't want to be planted in wet lawns. But here in my garden, even though it's been raked over by the deer, it's doing quite well and quite happy. So this is an apple tree. Unfortunately, I didn't know that Jonathan apples were susceptible to fire blight, so I planted it way back then, and it has had fire blight ever since, and some years it's not bad and this year it's bad. Here this is an American wisteria, and it's just finishing its bloom. It's going to get better and better as it gets older, but I had originally planted a Japanese wisteria here, which has much bigger blossoms that happen before the leaves come out, and it's very dramatic, but sometimes they take 10 years before they bloom, and then they don't bloom every year. Sometimes they only bloom every 1 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. This American wisteria, Wisteria macrostachya, this blooms every year once it gets started, so it's just going to get to be stronger and stronger plant. This is an example of one of the Canadian roses that we really love and promote here at Harlequin's Gardens, because they are so cold hardy on their own roots. They can live a long time, and disease resistant and cold hardy, and great performers for Colorado landscapes. And this is another one. This is one called Victorian Memory, or Isabella Skinner is its old name. And this is a great climber. It can get to 15 feet. This is one of the shrubs. This is a cotoneaster called red bead cotoneaster, and it is one of the Plant Select shrubs. Scott Skogerbo from Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery found out about this plant from the old director of the Cheyenne Station and got cuttings from them. And it's a terrific, amazing plant. It's sitting up here on the hill, not getting very much water, and big. The flowers are quite showy, lots of berries for the birds. and drought tolerant and very tough. We like it. That's part of the interconnectedness idea, is that we need to take care of things from the ground up, and then everything from there on will prosper. The main thing is to support health. And so those are the principles, and you can see all of the things that we are growing with just the support of the health of the earth and good horticulture, good care. So we're lucky to be here, fairly close to the foothills with this beautiful landscape. You can see the flatirons are there, and you can see all the way down the Front Range here. So we're very lucky to be here. This is our 30th year in business, and people come to us from Colorado Springs and eastern Colorado, and even have a customer from Nebraska, because they know if they come here and get our plants that they will survive in their difficult conditions. If it can grow here, and if we're selling it, we've already sort of pre-selected it to be adapted to Colorado conditions.